In a land shrouded in mist and secrets, Aveline was born with a forbidden secret. She carries both male and female organs, the result of a centuries-old curse that haunts her noble bloodline. Hidden away in her family's crumbling castle, she has spent her life tormented by whispers and shadows, battling to accept herself in a world that shuns her existence. But as the ominous blood moon approaches, dark forces begin to stir. An ancient sorcerer known as the Shadow Seer, the very architect of her family's curse, emerges from the shadows, demanding Aveline for a ritual that will grant him eternal power. As villagers turn against her and betrayals come to light, Aveline must uncover long-buried secrets about her lineage and her true nature. With only 5 nights until the blood moon, Aveline embarks on a harrowing journey into the depths of her family's twisted history, facing spectral visions, ancient prophecies, and a destiny she never chose. But as she discovers her own untapped powers, she realizes that breaking the curse may come at the ultimate cost, her humanity. Caught between light and dark, truth and deception, Aveline must decide, will she embrace the power within her and risk becoming the very monster she seeks to destroy, or sacrifice everything she holds dear to free her family from the curse that has bound them for generations? Based on a true story. Before we dive into this powerful story, let us know where you're tuning in from, and if you find it compelling, don't forget to hit subscribe. The wind howled through the ancient stone walls of the castle, carrying with it the whispers of secrets long buried. Aveline stood by the window of her secluded chamber, her breath fogging the frosted glass as she stared out at the shadowed forest beyond. A silver thread of moonlight pierced through the dark clouds, illuminating the twisted trees that surrounded her family's crumbling estate. The cold air nipped at her skin, but she barely noticed. Her thoughts were elsewhere, tangled in the web of mysteries that had defined her life. For as long as she could remember, Aveline had been hidden away in the farthest reaches of the castle, her existence a secret even to the villagers who lived nearby. She was the family shame, the curse they dared not reveal. Born with both male and female organs, she was a living testament to the darkness that had plagued her bloodline for centuries. To the world outside, Aveline was nothing more than a ghost, a rumor spoken of in hushed tones by those who ventured too close to the castle's shadow. Tonight, however, the air was thick with an energy she couldn't quite place. The blood moon, an event that occurred only once every decade, was nearing. She could feel its pull deep within her bones, a stirring that set her nerves on edge. The elders of the village spoke of the blood moon as a harbinger of doom, but to Aveline, it was something far worse, a reminder that the curse was growing stronger, inching ever closer to consuming her completely. A sharp rap on her door interrupted her thoughts. Turning, she saw Alara, a young girl from the village who had been her only companion for years, slipping into the room. Her face was pale, eyes wide with fear. "They're talking about you again," Alara whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. "The villagers, they say they've seen shadows moving in the forest. They think it's you, Aveline." Aveline's heart sank. She knew the villagers had always been wary of her family, but lately, their superstitions had grown darker, more sinister. "They see shadows in the forest every time the moon is full," Aveline replied, trying to sound dismissive. "It's just their fear talking." Alara shook her head, her hands twisting in the hem of her cloak. "No, this is different. They say a figure was seen near the river, someone cloaked in darkness. And now they think you're summoning something terrible with the blood moon approaching." Aveline felt a shiver run down her spine. She had heard the rumors before, but something in Alara's voice told her this time was different. The villagers were growing desperate, and desperation bred violence. "Let them think what they want," Aveline said, turning back to the window. "I am not afraid of shadows." But even as she said the words, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her, waiting for the right moment to strike. Later that night, as the castle's halls lay silent, Aveline crept down the winding staircase to the forbidden library, a place her father had once warned her never to enter. The air was thick with dust, and the scent of old parchment filled her nostrils as she lit a candle to guide her way. The flickering light danced on the walls, casting grotesque shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. She had come here searching for answers, for anything that could explain the strange pull she felt toward the blood moon. There were stories hidden in these books, secrets that her family had buried deep. If the curse was truly growing stronger, Aveline needed to know why. Her fingers brushed against the spines of ancient tomes until she found one bound in cracked leather, its title written in a language she couldn't quite decipher. She opened it carefully, the pages brittle beneath her touch. As she skimmed through the text, her eyes caught on a single phrase. The curse was never meant to imprison, it was meant to protect. Aveline's heart raced. What did that mean? The curse that had defined her existence, that had turned her into an outcast, was supposed to be some kind of protection. Before she could read further, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. Quickly, she blew out the candle and pressed herself against the wall, her heart pounding in her chest. The footsteps grew closer, heavy and deliberate, like those of someone who knew exactly where they were going. Aveline held her breath, praying that whoever it was wouldn't find her here. The steps stopped just outside the library door. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a voice she hadn't heard in years spoke, low and menacing. "You shouldn't be here, Aveline." It was her father. As she emerged from the shadows, Aveline could barely make out her father's face in the dim light, but the disappointment in his voice was unmistakable. "I warned you to stay away from this place," he said, his eyes cold. "There are secrets here that are better left forgotten." "What are you hiding from me?" Aveline demanded, her voice trembling. "I have a right to know the truth about this curse. You can't keep me locked away forever." Her father's expression hardened. "You have no idea what you're asking for, Aveline. This curse is not what you think it is. If you knew the truth, it would destroy you." Before she could press him further, he turned and left, the door slamming shut behind him. Aveline stood there in the darkness, her mind racing. What was he so afraid of? And why did it feel like the answers she sought were buried deeper than she ever imagined? That night, as the moonlight spilled through her window, Aveline lay awake, her father's words echoing in her mind. The blood moon was drawing closer, and with it, the secrets that her family had tried so hard to keep hidden. But she could feel it now, a dark force awakening within her, something she couldn't control. She made a silent vow to herself. She would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Because if she didn't, the curse that had haunted her family for generations might finally claim her as its next victim. And this time, there would be no escape. The dawn broke reluctantly over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of deep crimson and gold. Aveline had hardly slept, her father's words from the previous night still gnawing at her mind like a persistent echo. The secrets hidden within the castle seemed to press in on her, making the air feel thick and stifling. Determined to find answers, she slipped out of her chamber and made her way through the winding corridors of the castle. She needed fresh air, a moment to clear her thoughts before deciding what to do next. The castle grounds were quiet at this early hour, the frost-covered grass crunching beneath her boots as she made her way to the old garden, a place that had once been her mother's sanctuary. But as she reached the crumbling stone fountain at the garden's center, a chill ran down her spine. The air seemed to shift, growing colder, and the light of dawn dimmed as if a shadow had passed over the sun. Aveline froze, her breath visible in the sudden cold, her instincts screaming that she was no longer alone. A whisper, soft and sinister, drifted through the air. "Aveline." The voice was unlike any she had ever heard, a blend of 1,000 murmurs echoing as one. She turned, her heart hammering in her chest, but there was no one there. Only the shadows cast by the overgrown hedges danced in the pale light. "I know you can hear me," the voice whispered again, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. "The time is drawing near. The blood moon will soon rise, and you have a role to play." Aveline's hands clenched into fists. "Who are you? Show yourself," she demanded, But the only answer was a soft, mocking laugh that sent shivers down her spine. "You seek the truth," the voice continued, its tone dripping with malice. "But are you truly prepared to pay the price? Your mother thought she was. Look where it led her." Avelini's blood ran cold at the mention of her mother. "What do you know about her?" she shouted, spinning around to find the source of the voice. But all she could see were shifting shadows, as if the darkness itself had come to life. Suddenly, the shadows coalesced into a vaguely human shape, a towering figure cloaked in swirling black mist. It stood before her, its eyes two glowing orbs like dying embers. The Shadow Seer. Aveline had only heard whispers of him in hushed conversations, tales of an ancient sorcerer who could see into the souls of men and twist their fears into reality. "The curse on your family," the Shadow Seer said, his voice like the scraping of stones, "is not what you think. It is not simply a punishment. It is a key that I have been waiting centuries to claim." Aveline tried to steady her breathing, refusing to show fear. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The Shadow Seer's grin was a flash of sharp teeth in the darkness. "I want what was promised," he said. "You were born for a purpose, Aveline, one that you cannot escape. When the blood moon rises, you will come to me. It is your destiny, whether you wish it or not." Aveline took a step back, her mind racing. "I will never serve you," she spat. "I will find a way to break this curse." The Shadow Seer's laughter was a chilling sound that echoed through the garden. "You are bound to me, little heir. The blood in your veins sings with my magic. And if you do not come willingly, I will make you." The shadowy figure dissolved into mist, leaving Aveline standing alone in the garden, her heart pounding. The chill in the air lifted, but the weight of his words hung heavily on her shoulders. As she hurried back inside the castle, her thoughts were a tangled mess. The Shadow Seer's warning replayed in her mind, each word like a knife twisting in her gut. He claimed that the curse was a key, but a key to what? And why was she the one who had to pay the price for her ancestors' sins? Aveline found herself in the castle's grand hall, where the faint light of dawn filtered through the stained glass windows. There, waiting for her, was Alara, her eyes wide with concern. "I've been looking everywhere for you," Alara said, rushing to her side. "What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." "In a way, I have," Aveline replied, her voice unsteady. She glanced around to make sure they were alone before lowering her voice. "Alara, I need your help. The Shadow Seer, he spoke to me. He knows something about the curse." Alara's eyes widened with fear. "You mustn't listen to him, Aveline. The elders say he can twist your thoughts, make you believe lies. You cannot trust anything he says." "I don't have a choice," Aveline said, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "If I don't figure out what this curse truly is, I'm afraid of what will happen when the blood moon rises." Alara hesitated, then reached into the folds of her cloak and pulled out a worn, leather-bound book. "I found this in the village," she whispered. "It's old, older than anything I've ever seen. It might have the answers you're looking for." Aveline took the book, her fingers trembling as she opened it. The pages were filled with strange symbols and ancient writing, but one thing stood out, a drawing of a woman, her features eerily similar to Aveline's, standing beneath a blood moon. The inscription below read, "The heir of the dual bloodlines." "What does this mean?" Aveline asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Alara shook her head. "I don't know, but it looks like the answers lie in your family's past." "You must be careful, Aveline. The Shadow Seer isn't the only one who will stop at nothing to see this curse fulfilled." Aveline nodded, her resolve hardening. The blood moon was drawing closer, and with it, the answers she so desperately needed. But if the Shadow Seer's warning was true, then breaking the curse might come at a price she wasn't yet ready to pay. But one thing was certain, she would not be a pawn in his game. She would find the truth, no matter how dark or twisted it might be. As the first rays of the sun pierced through the windows, Aveline clutched the ancient book to her chest. The countdown to the blood moon had begun, and she was running out of time. The sun had barely risen above the forest canopy, casting the castle grounds in a dim, silvery light as Aveline made her way back to the forbidden library. Ilara's discovery had rattled her, but it had also given her a glimmer of hope. If there were answers to be found about the curse, they were likely hidden within the pages of the ancient books that lined the dusty shelves. Pushing open the heavy oak door, Aveline hesitated. The library was steeped in shadow, the air thick with the scent of old parchment and secrets. This time, she wasn't going to let fear stop her. She lit a candle and stepped inside, determined to uncover the truth, no matter how dark it might be. As she moved between the towering shelves, Aveline's eyes scanned the spines of the books, searching for anything that might connect to the inscription in Ilara's book, The Heir of the Dual Bloodlines. She pulled down several volumes, spreading them out on the long, dust-covered table. For hours, she pored over the faded texts, her candle slowly burning down to a stub. Most of what she found was cryptic, fragments of old spells and genealogies that hinted at curses and pacts made long ago. But none of it seemed to explain why she had been born the way she was, or what role she was meant to play in the Shadow Seer's twisted plan. Just as she was about to give up, she came across a brittle, leather-bound journal hidden behind a row of heavy tomes. Its pages were filled with cramped handwriting that looked painfully familiar. It was her mother's handwriting. Aveline's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't seen her mother's script in years, not since the day she had vanished without a trace. Her hands trembled as she turned the pages, each entry revealing fragments of her mother's thoughts and fears. The Shadow Seer has found me. I thought I could keep Aveline safe, but it seems I was wrong. The curse, it is not what they think. It was never meant to imprison us. It was meant to protect something far more powerful, something that even the Shadow Seer fears. Aveline's heart pounded as she continued reading. Her mother's entries grew more frantic, each one filled with cryptic references to the blood moon, the dual nature of their bloodline, and a hidden power that could either save or doom them all. The final entry was the most chilling. To break the curse, the heir must embrace both sides of themselves, male and female, light and dark. Only then can the true key be revealed. But the price? I fear the cost is too great. If Aveline ever reads this, I pray she is stronger than I was. Aveline's mind spun. All her life, she had believed that the curse was a punishment, a mark of shame placed upon her family. But her mother's words suggested something far more complex. The curse was meant to protect something, but what? And why did it require her to embrace both her male and female sides? Before she could process this revelation, the door to the library creaked open. Aveline instinctively blew out her candle and ducked behind the nearest shelf, clutching her mother's journal to her chest. The soft glow of a lantern illuminated the doorway, and Aveline's father stepped into the room. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow, as if he hadn't slept in days. He moved to the table where she had left the open books, his expression darkening as he scanned the pages. "You shouldn't have come here, Aveline," he said, his voice low and filled with warning. Aveline's heart raced, but she forced herself to step out of the shadows. "You lied to me," she said, holding up the journal. "All this time, you made me believe that the curse was a punishment." But Mother knew the truth, didn't she? Her father's face twisted with anger, but there was also a glimmer of something else, fear. "Your mother was a fool," he snapped. She thought she could defy the Shadow Seer, but in the end, she only brought more suffering upon herself. "The curse is not something you can simply break, Aveline. It is bound to our blood, to the very essence of who we are." "Then why was I born like this?" Aveline demanded, her voice rising. "What is the curse really protecting? And why does the Shadow Seer need me?" Her father hesitated, the tension between them crackling like a live wire. Finally, he lowered his gaze. "The Shadow Seer bound the curse to our bloodline because your ancestor betrayed him. The curse was his way of ensuring that no heir of our family would ever wield the power that was stolen from him. But you're different, Aveline." Aveline's stomach churned. "What do you mean?" "You are the first to be born with both male and female organs," he said quietly. The curse transformed in you. Your existence is an anomaly, a potential threat to the Shadow Seer's control. That is why he wants you. He believes you are the key to unlocking a power he cannot reach on his own. The weight of his words sank in, leaving Aveline reeling. All her life, she had seen her dual nature as a curse, a burden she was forced to bear in silence. But now, it seemed that the very thing she had been taught to hide might be the only thing that could save her family and herself. Before she could ask more, her father's expression shifted, his eyes darting toward the open doorway. "You must leave," he said urgently. "If the Shadow Seer learns that you've discovered the truth, he will come for you sooner than you think. Take whatever you've found here and go." "But where?" Aveline began, but her father cut her off. "Find the old shrine beneath the castle," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It was built to protect the key you seek. But be careful, there are things there that, even I do not understand." Aveline nodded, her mind racing. She slipped her mother's journal into the folds of her cloak and hurried from the library. As she made her way down the dark corridors, her heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination. The Shadow Seer thought she was his pawn, a vessel to be used for his twisted plans. But now, Aveline was more determined than ever to turn the tables. She would find the shrine, uncover the secrets her family had kept hidden, and use whatever power she had to break the curse once and for all. But as the blood moon drew closer, she couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out, and that the price for defying the Shadow Seer might be more than she was willing to pay. The castle's underground passages were cold and damp, the air thick with the scent of mildew and age. Aveline moved quickly, her heart thundering in her chest as she made her way through the labyrinth beneath the castle. Her father's warning had been clear: whatever secrets the old shrine held, they might be her only chance at breaking the curse. The flickering light from her lantern cast long shadows on the stone walls, and Aveline couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness itself was watching her, waiting for her to falter. But she pressed on, driven by the revelations in her mother's journal and her father's cryptic words. The deeper she descended, the colder the air became, as though she were walking into the heart of a grave. Finally, she reached an ancient iron door covered in strange, weathered symbols. It took all her strength to pull it open, the heavy metal groaning as if it hadn't been disturbed in centuries. Aveline stepped into the hidden chamber beyond, her breath catching as she took in the sight before her. The shrine was a vast, circular room with a high, domed ceiling. The walls were lined with faded tapestries depicting scenes of rituals and sacrifices under a blood-red moon. In the center of the chamber stood an ornate altar, surrounded by cracked pillars that seemed to hum with a faint, otherworldly energy. But it was the figure kneeling before the altar that made Aveline's blood run cold. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, his eyes widening in surprise before hardening into a look of fury. "I told you to stay away from this place," he hissed, rising to his feet. Aveline stepped forward, holding up her lantern to cast light on his face. "You've been hiding the truth from me for years," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and betrayal. "I deserve to know what's really going on." Her father's face was a mask of conflicting emotions, but in the flickering light, Aveline saw something she had never expected: fear. "The truth," he said slowly, "is more than you can comprehend, Aveline. If you knew what I have done, you would curse my name." Aveline's heart ached at the pain in his voice, but she refused to back down. "Tell me," she demanded. "Tell me why the Shadow Seer wants me. Tell me why Mother disappeared." "No more lies." Her father closed his eyes, his shoulders sagging as if a great weight had been placed upon them. "Very well," he said finally. "But know this: once you hear the truth, there will be no turning back." He gestured for her to sit, and as she did, he began to speak, his voice low and filled with sorrow. "Centuries ago, our family made a pact with the Shadow Seer. In exchange for power and wealth, your ancestor agreed to bind the family's bloodline to his dark magic. But when the Shadow Seer tried to claim his payment, a child born with both male and female attributes, your ancestor betrayed him, sealing away the true power of the curse." Avelini's eyes widened. So that's why the Shadow Seer needs me? To unlock the power that was sealed away? Her father nodded. Yes, you are the first to be born with both male and female organs since that pact was made. The Shadow Seer believes that you are the key to unlocking the power he was denied. That is why he has been watching you, waiting for the blood moon to complete his ritual. Aveline felt a chill run through her. And mother, she knew all of this? Her father's expression darkened. Your mother made her own pact with the Shadow Seer to protect you. She thought she could outsmart him, that she could break the curse. But in the end, she was taken, just as all those who defy him are. Aveline's hands clenched into fists. And you? She asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. What have you done to protect me? For a moment, he couldn't meet her eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. I betrayed you, Aveline. I made a deal with the Shadow Seer. In exchange for your safety, I agreed to help him prepare the ritual. But I never intended to let him succeed. I was hoping to find a way to break the curse before he could take you. The ground seemed to shift beneath Aveline's feet. Her father, the man who had kept her hidden away, had been working with the very creature that sought to destroy her. You were going to sacrifice me? She whispered, the words tasting like ash on her tongue. No, her father said, stepping forward with desperation in his eyes. I was trying to protect you. I thought if I could keep him satisfied with half measures, I could buy us time. But now, the blood moon is upon us and I am out of options. Before Aveline could respond, the chamber was suddenly filled with a cold, oppressive presence. The shadows along the walls twisted and writhed, coalescing into a dark figure, the Shadow Seer himself. You have failed me for the last time, the Shadow Seer hissed, his voice echoing like the tolling of a funeral bell. I should have known better than to trust a mortal with something as important as this. Aveline's father turned to face the Shadow Seer, drawing a dagger from his cloak. You will not take her, he snarled, his voice filled with a resolve that Aveline had never seen before. I will not let you have my daughter. The Shadow Seer's laughter was cold and hollow. You think you can stop me? He taunted. You are nothing more than a pawn, a tool to be discarded when you have outlived your usefulness. Before Aveline could react, the Shadow Seer raised a hand, and her father was thrown against the wall with a sickening crunch. He crumpled to the ground, blood pooling beneath him. No! Aveline screamed, rushing to her father's side. But it was too late. His eyes were already glazing over, his breath shallow and labored. Aveline, he whispered, his voice barely audible. You must find the shrine, break the seal, before it's too late. And with that, he was gone. Aveline's tears blurred her vision, but she forced herself to stand, turning to face the Shadow Seer. The dark sorcerer smiled, a cruel, mocking grin. You cannot escape your fate, child. You were born to serve me. But Aveline's grief had transformed into something far more potent, rage. I will find the shrine, she said, her voice steady despite the fear twisting in her gut. I will break your curse and I will destroy you. The Shadow Seer's laughter echoed through the chamber as he began to dissolve into shadows. We shall see, little heir. But know this, the blood moon is only 3 nights away. Time is not on your side. As the darkness receded, leaving her alone in the cold, silent shrine, Aveline knelt beside her father's lifeless form, her resolve hardening. She had lost everything, her family, her innocence, her hope. But she still had one thing left, the will to fight. With a deep breath, she took the dagger her father had dropped and slipped it into her belt. The blood moon was approaching, and she was running out of time. But she would not go down without a fight. Aveline was done running. Now it was time to hunt. The cold wind howled through the castle's broken windows as Aveline made her way back to her chambers, the weight of her father's death pressing heavily on her heart. The dagger he had given her felt like a lead weight at her side, but it also served as a grim reminder of the promise she had made. She would find the shrine and break the curse, no matter the cost. Her mind was a storm of thoughts, the pieces of her family's dark history slowly falling into place. The Shadow Seer had taken everything from her, her mother, her father, and now her chance at a normal life. But if her mother's journal was to be believed, Aveline's unique nature might also be her greatest weapon. She closed the door to her room behind her and leaned against it, trying to steady her breathing. The flickering light of her lantern cast long shadows across the walls, but she ignored them, focusing instead on the journal she had taken from the library. To break the curse, the heir must embrace both sides of themselves, male and female, light and dark. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, but their meaning remained frustratingly unclear. What did it mean to embrace both sides of herself? Was it simply a metaphor, or was there something more to it? Aveline moved to the large mirror that stood in the corner of her room, the glass dusty and cracked with age. She wiped it clean with her sleeve, staring at her reflection. All her life, she had hidden her true nature, ashamed of what she was. But now, that same duality was the key to defeating the Shadow Seer. Her fingers trembled as she unbuttoned her shirt, exposing the flesh beneath. The sight of her body, a strange blend of both male and female, had always filled her with shame. But now, she forced herself to look, to confront the truth she had tried to hide for so long. "Is this what you meant, Mother?" she whispered to herself. "Is this the power that he fears?" As if in answer, a sharp pain shot through her chest, doubling her over. It felt like fire racing through her veins, her heart pounding so hard it threatened to burst. She gasped, clutching at the edge of the table to keep herself upright. The sensation was unlike anything she had ever experienced, a surge of energy, both light and dark, warring within her. Images flashed before her eyes, the Shadow Seer standing beneath a blood-red moon, his hands outstretched, her mother, bound and pleading, the faces of villagers who had cursed her existence. The pain was overwhelming, but amidst the chaos, Aveline could feel something else, power, raw and untamed, waiting to be unleashed. Taking a deep breath, she focused inward, trying to control the raging storm within her. Slowly, the pain began to subside, the energy settling into a steady pulse that thrummed through her entire body. She opened her eyes, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her appearance had changed. Her eyes, once a dull hazel, now glowed faintly, one a brilliant gold, the other a deep, shadowy black. Her skin seemed to shimmer, caught between light and shadow, as if she were straddling two worlds at once. This is it," she whispered, a thrill of realization coursing through her. This was the power the Shadow Seer feared. The curse had not simply marked her, it had transformed her, giving her access to both light and dark magic. If she could harness this power, she might stand a chance against him. But how could she use it? And at what cost? A sudden knock at her door jolted her out of her thoughts. She quickly covered herself, hiding the changes to her body as best she could. "Who is it?" she called, her voice steadier than she felt. The door creaked open to reveal Alara, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. "Aveline, you need to come quickly," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "The villagers. They're gathering at the gates. They think you're the one behind all the strange occurrences. They're saying you're a witch." Aveline's blood ran cold. She had been so focused on the curse and the Shadow Seer that she hadn't realized how much the villagers' fear had grown. "How did they find out?" she asked, grabbing her cloak and wrapping it around herself to hide any lingering signs of her transformation. "They've been suspicious for years," Alara said, her voice urgent. "But now that your father is dead, they think you've been using dark magic to control the castle. They're saying you've made a pact with the Shadow Seer." Aveline's heart sank. She had no time for this. If she didn't find the shrine and unlock the secret to breaking the curse, everything her family had sacrificed would be in vain. But if the villagers stormed the castle, she would never get the chance to stop the Shadow Seer. She took a deep breath, trying to think. "I can't leave the castle now," she said, her voice filled with a resolve that surprised even her. "The blood moon is only 2 nights away. I have to find the shrine." Alara's eyes widened. But Aveline, if the villagers break through the gates, they'll kill you. They're convinced you're the source of the curse. Then I'll have to show them that I'm not, Aveline said, her eyes glowing faintly once more. I have to embrace what I am. If I can prove that I have the power to break the curse, maybe they'll listen. Alara hesitated, then nodded. I'll do what I can to buy you time. But please, be careful. As Alara left, Aveline turned back to the mirror, taking one last look at her reflection. The person staring back at her was no longer the frightened girl who had spent her life hiding in the shadows. She was something more, something the Shadow Seer feared. She could feel the magic within her, waiting to be unleashed. But she knew that tapping into it came with a cost, one she wasn't sure she was ready to pay. With the villagers at the gates and the blood moon fast approaching, Aveline was running out of time. But she was done being a pawn in someone else's game. She would find the shrine, unlock her true power, and end this curse once and for all. No matter the cost. The castle's great hall was eerily quiet as Aveline moved through it, her footsteps echoing off the cold stone floors. The soft glow of the torches flickered, casting strange shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. The panic that Alara had spoken of was beginning to spread, and Aveline could feel the tension in the air like a thick fog closing in around her. She reached the main entrance, where the heavy wooden doors groaned under the weight of the villagers gathered outside. The sound of their angry shouts and cries of witch and demon seeped through the cracks, filling the hall with an undercurrent of fear. Taking a deep breath, Aveline turned to Alara, who stood by her side, her face pale and anxious. I need you to go to the west wing, Aveline instructed. Find any old passages that lead out of the castle. If things go wrong, I may need a way to escape. Alara hesitated, her eyes wide. What are you going to do? I'm going to confront them, Aveline replied, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her gut. If they think I'm in league with the Shadow Seer, then I'll show them they're wrong. But I need to buy us more time. Alara nodded reluctantly and hurried off into the shadows. As soon as she was gone, Aveline took another deep breath, bracing herself and pushed open the heavy doors to face the mob. A surge of cold air and angry voices hit her like a wave as she stepped outside. The villagers stood clustered at the castle gates, their faces twisted with fear and rage. Torches flickered in the night, casting an orange glow that made the scene look like something out of a nightmare. Aveline raised her hands to show she was unarmed. Listen to me, she called out, trying to make her voice carry above the din. I am not your enemy. I want to break the curse that has plagued our land just as much as you do. The crowd hesitated, but before Aveline could speak further, a figure stepped forward, parting the villagers like a knife through water. It was Father Benedict, the village priest, his face twisted with righteous fury. You expect us to believe your lies? Father Benedict shouted, his voice booming over the crowd. You are the spawn of darkness. Born with the mark of the curse, destined to bring ruin to us all. Aveline's heart sank. She had always known Father Benedict had no love for her family, but she had not expected him to be so openly hostile. You know nothing of the curse, she said, trying to keep her voice calm. I am trying to stop the Shadow Seer before it's too late. The priest's eyes gleamed with a cold, fanatical light. The Shadow Seer has already claimed your soul, child. Look at yourself. You are neither man nor woman, but a twisted mockery of both. That is the true mark of the devil. A murmur rippled through the crowd, and Aveline could see the fear in their eyes turning into something more dangerous. She clenched her fists, trying to keep her anger in check. My condition is not a curse, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. It is a part of who I am, but it does not make me evil. Father Benedict sneered. You expect us to believe that? You've been hiding away in that cursed castle, dabbling in dark magic, plotting with the Shadow Seer. You cannot fool us any longer. The villagers' cries grew louder, their torches blazing as they surged forward. Panic rose in Aveline's chest, but before she could think of what to do next, she felt a sudden, searing pain in her side. She gasped, doubling over as she realized Father Benedict had thrown something at her, a small, silver dagger that glinted in the firelight. The pain was intense, but it also triggered something inside her. The magic she had struggled to control surged through her veins, unbidden and wild. Aveline staggered back, clutching her side as her vision blurred. The energy within her roared to life, and without thinking, she raised her hand. A burst of light and shadow erupted from her fingertips, sending the front row of villagers reeling backward. The crowd screamed in terror, and even Father Benedict took a step back, his eyes wide with shock. "Witchcraft," he cried, pointing at her. "She has made a pact with the Shadow Seer." Aveline's heart pounded in her chest as she struggled to control the wild magic coursing through her. She could feel both light and darkness fighting for dominance, the power threatening to tear her apart. Desperate, she looked toward the castle, hoping to see Alara returning with an escape route. But before she could gather her thoughts, Father Benedict's expression shifted, turning from fear to a sinister, calculating smile. "This is your chance, people," he shouted to the villagers. "Seize her now, before she calls down more of the devil's magic." The crowd surged forward again, and Aveline realized with horror that Father Benedict was no longer simply trying to protect the village, he was using their fear to solidify his own power. If he could make her the scapegoat, he would gain absolute control over the people. Aveline turned and bolted back into the castle, her side throbbing where the dagger had struck her. The villagers were pounding on the gates, trying to force their way inside. She needed to find Alara and get to the shrine before Father Benedict and the mob could reach her. She sprinted through the dark corridors, her breaths coming in ragged gasps. She could still feel the chaotic energy inside her, threatening to spill over, but she pushed it down. Now was not the time to lose control. Finally, she reached the west wing, where Alara was waiting with a hidden passageway revealed behind a tapestry. "Hurry, Aveline," Alara urged, her face pale with fear. "They're right behind you." Without wasting a moment, Aveline followed Alara into the narrow passage, the sound of the villagers' shouts growing fainter as they descended into the darkness. The air was thick and stale, and the tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, but Aveline forced herself to keep moving. As they reached the end of the passage, Alara turned to her, eyes wide. "What happened out there?" "I heard the crowd." Father Benedict, Aveline spat, anger and betrayal twisting in her gut. "He's using the villagers' fear to turn them against me. He wants to keep them under his control." Alara's expression turned grim. "He's always been a fanatic, but this... I never thought he would go this far." "He's working with the Shadow Seer," Aveline realized, the pieces falling into place. "That's why he's so determined to destroy me. If the curse is broken, he loses his hold over the village." Alara's eyes widened. "Then we have to reach the shrine before they do," she said. "If we can break the curse, we might have a chance to stop him." Aveline nodded, her resolve hardening. "We will," she said, her voice steady. "No matter what it takes." Together, they plunged deeper into the darkness, the weight of the villagers' hatred and Father Benedict's treachery driving them forward. The blood moon was only 2 nights away, and time was running out. But Aveline had one thing the Shadow Seer and Father Benedict hadn't counted on, the power of her dual nature. And she was finally ready to use it. Aveline and Alara emerged from the secret passage into the cold, mist-shrouded forest beyond the castle walls. The moon was a sliver in the sky, but its light was dimmed by the thick fog that clung to the trees like ghostly fingers. The air was damp and heavy, filled with the scent of wet earth and something else, something ancient and foreboding. "This way," Alara whispered, pointing toward the river that wound through the forest. "The shrine should be near the water." Aveline nodded, clutching the dagger her father had left her. Every step was a struggle as exhaustion and pain gnawed at her side where Father Benedict's dagger had cut her. The wound throbbed with every heartbeat, but she forced herself to keep moving. The blood moon was only 2 nights away, and she was running out of time. The sound of rushing water grew louder as they approached the riverbank. Aveline's breath came in shallow gasps, her heart pounding not just from exertion, but from the sense that something was watching her from the shadows. She had felt it ever since they had entered the forest, a presence, cold and malevolent, that sent chills down her spine. Alara stopped suddenly, her eyes wide. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Aveline listened, her pulse quickening. At first, she thought it was just the wind rustling through the trees, but then she heard it, soft voices, whispering just beyond the edge of hearing. It was as if the river itself was trying to speak to her. "The spirits," Alara said, her voice trembling. "They are restless tonight." Aveline knew the legends of the river spirits, restless souls who had been sacrificed by the Shadow Seer over the centuries. According to the stories, they were bound to the river, unable to move on until the curse was broken. As they reached the riverbank, Aveline felt the presence intensify. The air grew colder, and the whispers became louder, more insistent. She could see faint, glowing figures moving just beneath the surface of the water, their forms shifting and flickering like candle flames. "Ilara, stay close," Aveline warned, her voice barely more than a whisper. She stepped closer to the water's edge, drawn by an invisible force. The river seemed to pulse with a strange energy, the water glowing faintly in the dim moonlight. Suddenly, the whispers coalesced into a single voice, a woman's voice, filled with sorrow and desperation. "Aveline, help us." Aveline's breath caught in her throat. "Who are you?" she called out, her voice shaking. The water rippled, and one of the glowing figures rose to the surface. It was the shape of a woman, her eyes hollow and filled with an agony that made Aveline's heart clench. "We are the lost ones," the spirit said, her voice like the rustling of dry leaves. "Bound to this river by the Shadow Seer's curse." Alara gasped and took a step back, but Aveline held her ground. "How can I free you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. The spirit's eyes seemed to pierce into Aveline's soul. "You must reach the shrine," she said. "But beware, the path is guarded by shadows. The Shadow Seer will not let you break his hold so easily." The other spirits began to rise from the water, their voices joining in a haunting chorus. "Beware the shadows, beware the darkness that walks with him." Aveline's heart pounded. She knew time was running out. "Tell me where the shrine is," she pleaded. "I have to stop him before the blood moon." The woman's spirit drifted closer, her form wavering like mist. "The shrine lies beyond the river, hidden beneath the ancient willow. But be warned, child, the Shadow Seer has placed wards to protect it. Only one who can embrace both light and darkness may pass." Before Aveline could ask more, the spirit began to fade, her form dissolving into the mist. The other spirits followed, their whispers fading into the night air until only the sound of the rushing river remained. Alara clutched Aveline's arm, her face pale. "We need to go," she urged. "If what they said is true, the Shadow Seer will know we are close." Aveline nodded, her mind racing. The spirits had given her a clue. She needed to find the ancient willow and pass through the Shadow Seer's wards. But there was one thing she couldn't shake, the warning about embracing both light and darkness. What did it mean? And how could she use her dual nature to break through the wards? As they made their way along the river, Aveline tried to piece together everything she had learned. Her father's dying words, her mother's journal, and now the spirit's warning, it all pointed to one thing. She would have to embrace both sides of herself if she wanted to stop the Shadow Seer. But could she truly control the darkness that lurked within her without losing herself? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden rustling in the bushes ahead. Alara grabbed her arm, pulling her to a stop. "Someone's coming," she whispered. Aveline pressed herself against a tree, peering into the darkness. At first, she saw nothing but shadows, but then she caught a glimpse of movement, figures clad in black robes, their faces hidden beneath hoods. "The Shadow Seer's minions," Alara hissed. "They must have followed us from the village." Aveline's heart raced. They couldn't afford to be caught, not when they were so close to finding the shrine. "We need to go," she whispered. Now, together, they slipped deeper into the forest, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of fallen leaves. The air was filled with the scent of damp earth and decay, and the oppressive feeling of being watched never left them. As they neared a bend in the river, Aveline spotted a massive, gnarled tree looming ahead. Its twisted branches reached out like skeletal fingers, and beneath it, she could see the faint outline of a stone archway half buried in the earth. The shrine. There it is, she whispered, her heart leaping with hope. But as they approached, a barrier of shimmering light crackled into existence, blocking their way. Alara's eyes widened. The wards, she breathed. How are we supposed to get through? Aveline stared at the barrier, her mind racing. The spirits had said that only one who could embrace both light and darkness could pass. She took a deep breath, focusing inward on the energy that surged within her. Slowly, she raised her hands, letting both the light and dark magic flow through her veins. The air around her seemed to shimmer as the two opposing forces merged, forming a swirling sphere of energy in her hands. Please, let this work, she whispered, stepping forward and pressing her hands against the barrier. For a moment it resisted, crackling with a fierce energy that sent jolts of pain up her arms. But then, with a sound like shattering glass, the barrier dissolved. Alara let out a gasp of relief, but Aveline was already moving forward, her mind focused on the task ahead. The entrance to the shrine yawned open like the mouth of a great beast, and she knew that whatever awaited her inside would test every ounce of strength she had. But there was no turning back now. The blood moon was almost upon them, and the fate of her family, and perhaps the entire village, hung in the balance. Together, she and Alara stepped into the darkness of the shrine, ready to face whatever horrors awaited them. The ancient stone walls of the shrine pressed in on Aveline and Alara as they ventured deeper into the darkness. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decayed stone, every breath tinged with the metallic tang of ancient magic. Aveline's heart raced with every step, the weight of her task and the whispers of the spirits still echoing in her mind. The flickering light from their single lantern cast eerie shadows on the walls, where faded carvings depicted long-forgotten rituals performed beneath the blood moon. As they descended further, the air grew colder, and Aveline could feel the ancient power pulsing beneath her feet. She knew they were getting closer to the heart of the shrine, the place where the curse had been first bound. Alara's grip on Aveline's arm tightened as they came to a massive set of double doors, the wood old and splintered, but reinforced with bands of iron. Strange symbols were etched into the surface, glowing faintly with a blue light that sent chills down Aveline's spine. She recognized the symbols from her mother's journal. They were wards meant to seal something powerful within. This must be it, Alara whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. The place where your family's curse began. Aveline nodded, her resolve hardening. She could feel the magic thrumming in the air, calling to the strange energy within her. Whatever lay beyond those doors was the key to ending the curse. Steeling herself, she pushed the heavy doors open with all her strength. As the doors groaned open, a wave of cold air rushed out, and they found themselves standing in a vast underground chamber. At its center was an altar carved from black stone, its surface covered in strange, blood-red markings. Aveline's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the figure bound to the altar by chains of light, her mother. No, it can't be, Aveline gasped, her eyes wide with shock. Her mother's face was pale, her eyes closed as if she were asleep, but her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. How could she still be alive after all these years? Aveline. Alara whispered, her voice trembling. Is that really her? Yes, Aveline replied, her voice thick with emotion. It's her. But how? Before she could move closer, a deep, mocking voice filled the chamber, echoing off the walls. So, you finally found her, the voice said. A dark figure emerged from the shadows, the air around him crackling with dark energy. The Shadow Seer. Aveline's rage surged, her hands clenched into fists. What have you done to her? She demanded, stepping forward. The magic inside her flared, light and shadow swirling around her as if responding to her fury. The Shadow Seer's eyes gleamed with a cold, cruel amusement. "Your mother is here because she chose to be," he said. "She sacrificed herself to protect you, Aveline." But even her sacrifice wasn't enough to break the curse. Aveline's heart twisted with grief and confusion. "What are you talking about?" she shouted. "What sacrifice?" The Shadow Seer moved closer to the altar, his dark cloak trailing behind him like a shadow. "Your mother made a pact with me when you were born," he said, his voice smooth and taunting. "She thought she could outwit me, use her own magic to protect you. But in the end, she was just as much a pawn as the rest of your bloodline." Aveline's mind spun, fragments of her mother's journal flashing through her thoughts. The entries that spoke of sacrifices, of trying to protect her at all costs. "She gave herself up to keep me safe," Aveline whispered, the weight of realization crashing down on her. The Shadow Seer's smile widened. "Exactly. Your mother was the one who sealed the curse into your bloodline, binding herself to the shrine to keep its power contained. But now, with the blood moon rising, the curse has grown too strong. Not even her sacrifice can stop what's coming." Aveline felt a tear slip down her cheek, but she refused to show weakness. "I won't let you use her," she said, her voice shaking with fury. "I will break the curse and I will destroy you." The Shadow Seer laughed, the sound dark and hollow. "You truly think you can break the curse? You, who have barely begun to understand the power you hold." He gestured toward her mother. "Only one who embraces both light and darkness can unlock the full potential of the curse. That is why you were born, Aveline. You are the key." Before she could respond, the Shadow Seer waved his hand, and the chains binding her mother to the altar tightened. Aveline's mother gasped, her eyes fluttering open for the first time. "Aveline, you must not. Listen to him," she whispered, her voice weak but determined. "Mother!" Aveline cried, rushing forward, but the Shadow Seer stepped between them, his eyes blazing with dark magic. "You will choose, Aveline," he said, his voice a harsh whisper. "Either embrace your destiny and become the vessel for the curse, or watch your mother die as the blood moon rises. It is the only way to save her." Aveline's heart pounded, her mind racing. She could feel the magic within her, the light and dark fighting for control. Everything her mother had done, all the sacrifices her family had made, it had all led to this moment. "I will not be your pawn," she said, her voice steady despite the terror gnawing at her. "I will find another way." The Shadow Seer's eyes narrowed. "Then prove it," he hissed. He waved his hand, and the room was suddenly filled with swirling shadows, the air alive with dark energy. The altar began to glow, the markings on its surface flaring with a blinding light. Aveline turned to Alara, who was standing frozen in fear. "Get my mother out of here," she shouted over the roar of magic. "I'll hold him off." Alara nodded, rushing toward the altar. But as she tried to free Aveline's mother from the chains, the Shadow Seer's laughter filled the air. "Do you truly think you can stop me?" he taunted. "You do not even understand the power you wield." Aveline clenched her fists, drawing on the magic within her. The air around her crackled with energy, light and shadow swirling together in a chaotic dance. She could feel the two forces merging, a dangerous but powerful mix that sent waves of pain through her body. But she couldn't stop now. She had to break through the darkness to find the strength to embrace both sides of herself. The curse was bound to her blood, but it was also the source of her power. If she could control it, maybe, just maybe, she could turn it against the Shadow Seer. With a cry of defiance, Aveline raised her hands, releasing a blast of magic that sent the Shadow Seer stumbling back. The air was filled with a blinding light as the shadows around them dissolved, revealing her mother, freed from the chains. "Aveline, you did it," her mother whispered, tears streaming down her face. But Aveline knew this was only the beginning. The blood moon was almost upon them, and the final confrontation with the Shadow Seer was fast approaching. She would need every ounce of her newfound power if she was to break the curse and save them all. "Come on, we have to go," Aveline urged, grabbing her mother's arm. But as they fled the chamber, she couldn't shake the feeling that the Shadow Seer had one last trick up his sleeve. The true test was still to come. The moon hung high above the forest, its pale light filtering through the trees like the cold gaze of an unforgiving watcher. Aveline's breaths came in ragged gasps as she led her mother and Alara through the twisting paths of the ancient woods. Behind them, the shadows seemed to move of their own accord, and the air was thick with a dark magic that clung to their skin like oil. The confrontation with the Shadow Seer in the shrine had left her shaken, her body still trembling from the surge of magic she had unleashed. Her mother leaned heavily on her, weak from years of imprisonment, but she pressed on, driven by sheer willpower. The blood moon would rise fully in less than a day, and they were running out of time. Alara kept a vigilant watch on their surroundings, her eyes wide with fear. "Aveline, where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "The Shadow Seer's power is growing. We won't be able to hide from him for long." Aveline's mind raced as she tried to think of a plan. The blood moon's magic was strengthening the Shadow Seer, but it was also enhancing her own powers. The key to defeating him lay in embracing her dual nature, both light and dark, but she still didn't fully understand how to control it. "We need to get to the sanctum of the dual flame," Aveline said finally, her voice tinged with urgency. "It's the one place where the balance of light and darkness can be fully harnessed. If I can tap into that power, I might be able to break the curse once and for all." Her mother, leaning heavily on Aveline's shoulder, looked up with pain-filled eyes. "Aveline, the sanctum is dangerous," she whispered. "Only those who can truly embrace both sides of themselves can survive its trials. It nearly destroyed me." Aveline's heart clenched at the sight of her mother's frail form. "I don't have a choice," she said softly. "The Shadow Seer is too powerful. If I don't do this, he'll take me, and this time, there won't be a way out." As they continued through the forest, the air grew colder, the ground beneath their feet turning to frost despite the late spring. The shadows seemed to move closer, and Aveline could feel the pull of dark magic growing stronger with each passing moment. They were nearing the sanctum, but so were the Shadow Seer's forces. The trees opened up to reveal a clearing where the earth was blackened and charred, as if it had been scorched by fire. In the center stood the entrance to the sanctum of the dual flame, a towering archway of ancient stone, covered in runes that glowed faintly in the moonlight. The air around it hummed with energy, a strange mix of warmth and cold that sent shivers down Aveline's spine. "We're here," Aveline said, tightening her grip on her mother's arm. "But I have to go inside alone. The trials are meant for me." Alara shook her head. "You can't face this alone," she insisted. "Let me help you." "No," Aveline said firmly, her eyes glowing with a determined light. "This is something only I can do. The sanctum's magic responds to the duality within me. If I fail, I need you to protect my mother and get her far away from here." Her mother reached up, her trembling hand cupping Aveline's cheek. "Be careful, my child," she whispered. "You're stronger than you know, but do not let the darkness consume you." Aveline nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She turned toward the stone archway, taking a deep breath to steady herself. She could feel the pull of the sanctum, a force that called to the magic within her, urging her to step forward. With one last look at Alara and her mother, Aveline crossed the threshold into the sanctum. The world seemed to shift as she entered, the air growing thick with magic. The entrance behind her sealed shut, leaving her in total darkness. For a moment, panic threatened to overtake her, but she forced herself to stay calm. This was a test, a trial that would determine whether she could control the powers of light and darkness within her. A faint glow appeared ahead, and Aveline walked toward it, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The glow grew brighter until she found herself standing in a vast, circular chamber. In the center of the room was a stone pedestal, and upon it burned two flames, one pure white, the other an inky black. The flames twisted together, intertwining in a delicate dance, but they never fully merged. A voice, low and resonant, echoed through the chamber. "To break the curse, you must become one with the dual flame. Light and darkness, strength and vulnerability, you must embrace them all. Aveline swallowed hard, stepping closer to the pedestal. She could feel the heat from the white flame and the cold from the black flame, both energies tugging at her, trying to pull her in opposite directions. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she reached out her hands, feeling the raw power of the flames searing her skin. Pain shot through her as she tried to hold both flames in her hands, the light burning one side of her and the darkness freezing the other. She gritted her teeth, refusing to let go, even as the pain grew unbearable. This was the test. Could she truly embrace both sides of herself without letting one consume the other? Images flashed before her eyes, her mother's sacrifice, her father's betrayal, the villagers' hatred. But amid the chaos, she saw glimpses of hope, Ilara's unwavering support, her mother's love, and the strength she had found within herself. The flames seemed to respond to her resolve, their energies merging into a single, blinding light. Aveline screamed as the power surged through her, threatening to tear her apart. But she held on, focusing on the balance she needed to maintain. She was both light and dark, neither one nor the other. She was both. With a final, agonizing burst, the flames merged fully, enveloping her in a radiant glow. The pain vanished, replaced by a surge of strength unlike anything she had ever felt. The dual flame had become one, and with it, so had she. The chamber around her began to fade, the darkness lifting as she found herself back in the forest clearing. The air was still, the oppressive weight of the Shadow Seer's magic gone. She could see Ilara and her mother staring at her with wide eyes, their expressions a mix of relief and awe. Aveline. Ilara breathed, her voice filled with wonder. What happened? Aveline looked down at her hands, which still glowed faintly with the merged light and dark energy. I did it, she said, her voice steady. I've embraced both sides of myself. Now, I have the power to break the curse. But before they could celebrate, a dark, chilling laugh echoed through the forest, sending a shiver down Aveline's spine. The shadows at the edge of the clearing began to writhe, and the air turned cold once more. The Shadow Seer stepped out of the darkness, his eyes blazing with fury. You think you can defy me? He hissed, his voice like the crack of thunder. The blood moon has risen, and with it, my power is complete. You may have passed your little test, but you are still nothing compared to me. Aveline's heart pounded, but she refused to back down. The sanctum had given her the strength she needed, but the final battle was about to begin. The blood moon loomed overhead, casting its crimson light on the clearing, and she knew that everything would come down to this last confrontation. She had one chance to end the curse, and she would not fail. The air crackled with tension as the blood moon reached its zenith, casting an eerie red glow over the forest clearing. The dark figure of the Shadow Seer stood at the edge of the shadows, his eyes burning with malevolent fury. Aveline could feel the surge of his dark magic, the power of the blood moon coursing through him, making the ground tremble beneath her feet. You've come far, child, the Shadow Seer sneered, his voice cold and mocking. But your journey ends here. The blood moon has risen, and you will fulfill your destiny as my vessel. Aveline's heart pounded, but she refused to show fear. She had faced her darkest fears in the sanctum, embraced her dual nature, and now wielded a power that was both light and dark. She could feel it thrumming through her veins, a steady pulse that made her feel stronger than she had ever been. I am no one's pawn, Aveline said, stepping forward with a newfound confidence. The curse ends tonight. I will not let you use me to gain more power. The Shadow Seer's laughter filled the air, a sound that seemed to make the very trees shudder. You still don't understand, do you? He said, his voice like the whisper of death. This curse is bound to your bloodline. You were born to fulfill the pact your ancestors made. There is no escape. Aveline glanced back at Ilara and her mother, who stood behind her with fear in their eyes, but unwavering resolve. They had risked everything to help her reach this moment. She couldn't fail them now. She turned back to the Shadow Seer, her eyes blazing with determination. Maybe the curse is bound to my blood, she said, her voice rising above the howl of the wind. "But I am more than what you made me. I've embraced the power within me, and I will use it to end your hold over my family." The Shadow Seer's eyes narrowed, his smile fading. "Very well," he said softly, raising his hands. The ground beneath them began to tremble, dark tendrils of shadow snaking up from the earth. "If you will not submit, then you will be destroyed." With a roar, the Shadow Seer unleashed a torrent of dark magic, the air rippling with raw energy. Aveline braced herself, drawing on the combined power of light and darkness within her. She raised her hands, summoning a barrier of pure energy that clashed against the Shadow Seer's attack. The impact was like a thunderclap, the force of their magic colliding, sending shockwaves through the clearing. Aveline gritted her teeth, her muscles straining as she struggled to hold the barrier. The Shadow Seer's power was immense, fueled by centuries of dark magic and the full force of the blood moon. "Hold on, Aveline," Alara shouted, her voice barely audible over the roar of the magical onslaught. But Aveline's strength was waning. The darkness within her was growing stronger, threatening to consume the light she had fought so hard to control. Desperate, Aveline drew deeper into herself, searching for the balance she had found in the sanctum. She closed her eyes, focusing on the dual flame within her, the light that represented hope, love, and sacrifice, and the darkness that was born from pain, fear, and power. If she could merge the two forces fully, she might stand a chance. "Embrace it," her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "Both sides are a part of you. Use them." Aveline's eyes snapped open, a new determination burning within them. She let the barrier drop, allowing the Shadow Seer's magic to surge toward her. But instead of resisting, she absorbed it, letting the darkness mingle with her own energy. Pain ripped through her, but she held on, refusing to let it break her. The Shadow Seer's eyes widened in shock. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "You cannot control that much power." But Aveline's lips curved into a fierce smile. "Watch me," she said. She raised her hands, and a sphere of swirling light and darkness erupted from her, the combined energies spinning faster and faster until they were almost blinding. The ground shook, and the air was filled with the sound of crackling energy as the sphere expanded, pushing back the Shadow Seer's darkness. With a scream of defiance, Aveline unleashed the full force of her power. The sphere exploded outward, a shockwave of light and darkness that tore through the clearing. The Shadow Seer was thrown back, his dark form flickering like a dying flame as he struggled to regain control. But Aveline was relentless. She stepped forward, channeling every ounce of her power into a single, devastating blast. The ground beneath the Shadow Seer cracked, and he screamed as the light pierced through him, tearing him apart from the inside. "No," he howled, his form collapsing into shadows. "This is not possible." "The curse. It ends with me," Aveline said, her voice filled with a quiet, fierce resolve. She summoned one last surge of energy, the light and darkness within her merging into a blinding beam that struck the Shadow Seer. There was a sound like shattering glass, and the Shadow Seer's form disintegrated, his screams fading into the night. The dark tendrils that had snaked across the clearing vanished, and the oppressive weight of his magic lifted, leaving the air clear and still. Aveline collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath as the energy drained from her. The blood moon, which had glowed so fiercely above, began to dim, its crimson light fading to a soft silver. The curse that had bound her family for generations was broken. "Aveline!" Alara rushed to her side, helping her to stand. "You did it. You really did it." Her mother approached slowly, tears streaming down her face. "My brave girl, you broke the curse," she whispered, her voice filled with awe and pride. Aveline looked up at the sky, the weight of centuries of darkness finally lifting from her shoulders. But she knew the cost had been high. The magic had left her drained, and she could feel the scars of the darkness that she had embraced. She was free, but she would never be the same. "There's still so much to do," Aveline said softly, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "The village, the spirits, they need to be set free. Alara nodded. But for now, let's get you back to the castle. You need rest. As they turned to leave the clearing, Aveline glanced back one last time at the place where the Shadow Seer had fallen. The ground was scorched, but the air was clear, the darkness finally vanquished. But as they walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that the echoes of the curse were not entirely gone. She had broken the Shadow Seer's hold, but the power she had unleashed had changed her. She would have to learn to live with the darkness that was now a part of her. For tonight, though, she had won. The blood moon had set, and the first rays of dawn were breaking through the trees, a new beginning for her, her family, and the village she had saved. But the battle was not over. It had only just begun. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting the forest in soft shades of gold and pink. The blood moon had set, its crimson glow finally vanquished, but the ground was still scorched from the battle, and the air remained heavy with the remnants of magic. Aveline leaned against a tree, her breaths coming in shallow gasps as she tried to regain her strength. Alara and her mother stood beside her, their faces etched with a mixture of relief and concern. Though the Shadow Seer had been defeated, Aveline knew that their fight wasn't truly over. The curse had been broken, but the darkness she had absorbed still pulsed within her, like a second heartbeat that threatened to overtake her at any moment. Aveline, you need to rest, Alara urged, her eyes filled with worry. You used so much magic, you're barely standing. Aveline shook her head, pushing herself upright. There's no time, she said, her voice hoarse but determined. The Shadow Seer may be gone, but the curse left behind scars that need to be healed. The spirits are still bound to this land, and I can still feel his darkness within me. Her mother reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. You have already done so much, she whispered, her eyes filled with pride and sorrow. Let us take you back to the castle. The villagers will understand. They need to see that their savior has survived. Aveline winced at the word savior. She didn't feel like one. The darkness that had helped her defeat the Shadow Seer now clung to her like a shadow she couldn't shake. There's one last thing I need to do, she said, her voice steady despite the pain coursing through her. I need to cleanse this land of the remnants of his magic. And for that, I need to return to the river. Alara's eyes widened. But Aveline, you're barely alive. If you use any more magic, it could. I know the risks, Aveline interrupted gently, her gaze softening. But this is my burden to bear. The Shadow Seer's darkness is tied to me now, and if I don't end it here, it will only continue to spread. Her mother's grip on her hand tightened. There must be another way. Aveline shook her head slowly. I have to try. If I don't, everything we've fought for will be in vain. With a heavy heart, Aveline turned and made her way back toward the river where she had first encountered the spirits. Alara and her mother followed close behind, their footsteps silent on the damp forest floor. The air grew colder the closer they came to the water, the shadows lengthening despite the rising sun. When they reached the riverbank, Aveline could see the faint, shimmering forms of the spirits waiting for her, their eyes filled with both hope and sorrow. They had been bound to the Shadow Seer's curse for centuries, and now they looked to her for their final release. She took a deep breath, stepping forward until her boots touched the edge of the water. The spirits crowded closer, their whispering voices filling her mind. Free us, free us. Aveline raised her hands, summoning the last remnants of her strength. She could feel the dual energies within her, light and darkness, swirling in a chaotic dance, each one trying to overpower the other. The Shadow Seer's magic still clung to her soul, like a dark stain she couldn't wash away. This is it, she thought. The ultimate test. Taking a deep breath, she closed her eyes and reached deep within herself, drawing upon the light and darkness she had embraced in the sanctum. The air around her crackled with energy as she poured her magic into the river, her power flowing through the water like a cleansing fire. The spirits' cries grew louder, their forms flickering as the magic washed over them. Aveline gritted her teeth, pushing harder, feeling the darkness within her beginning to unravel. But the pain was intense, like shards of glass tearing through her veins. Alara watched in horror as Avelini's face twisted with agony. "Aveline, stop," she shouted. "You're going to kill yourself." But Aveline couldn't stop now. The darkness was rooted too deeply, feeding on her fear and pain. If she didn't finish this now, the curse would never truly be broken. She pushed harder, forcing every ounce of magic she had left into the river. "Let go," a voice echoed in her mind, her mother's voice, soft and filled with love. "The darkness does not define you. Let the light guide you." Aveline's eyes snapped open, tears streaming down her face. She realized then what she had to do. Instead of fighting the darkness, she allowed herself to accept it fully, letting it merge with the light within her. The two forces collided, then began to blend into a single, brilliant light. With a final, desperate cry, Aveline released the combined magic into the river. The water erupted in a burst of light so bright it seared her vision, and she collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath as the power drained from her. The spirits let out a collective sigh, their forms dissolving into the air like mist in the morning sun. The river's water, once dark and tainted, now ran clear, the last remnants of the curse washed away. Alara and Aveline's mother rushed to her side as she collapsed, her body limp and pale. "Aveline, stay with us," Alara cried, shaking her. But Aveline's eyes were unfocused, her breaths shallow. She had given everything, every last drop of magic, every ounce of her strength, to cleanse the land. The darkness that had clung to her was gone, but so was the light that had kept her alive. "No, you can't leave us," her mother sobbed, cradling Aveline's head in her lap. "Please, my child, don't go." A faint smile touched Aveline's lips as she looked up at her mother. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I did it. The curse is broken." Her eyes fluttered shut, her breath slowing to a whisper. The river, now free of the Shadow Seer's curse, sparkled in the morning light, a symbol of the peace Aveline had fought so hard to achieve. But as her spirit began to drift, she felt a warmth envelop her, pulling her back from the brink. The spirits she had freed, now released from their torment, surrounded her, their soft voices whispering words of gratitude. "Alara, mother," Aveline gasped, her voice barely more than a breath. I think I can stay." A soft, golden light surrounded her, healing the wounds the darkness had left behind. The spirits, in one final act of gratitude, returned a part of the magic she had used to save them, restoring her life. Aveline's eyes fluttered open, her breath returning in a sharp gasp. "You really did it." Aveline nodded weakly, a faint smile on her lips. "The curse, it's truly gone." As the first rays of the morning sun bathed them in light, Aveline knew that she had won. The curse was broken, the darkness vanquished. She had been willing to sacrifice everything, but in the end, she had been given a second chance, a chance to rebuild, to heal, and to finally live a life free of the shadows that had haunted her. But the journey was not yet over. Though the curse was gone, the scars it had left would take time to heal. For now, though, she had earned a moment of peace. The golden light of dawn filtered through the castle's broken windows, bathing the crumbling stone walls in a warm, amber glow. Aveline stood at the highest tower, overlooking the village that had once feared her as a cursed outcast. The air was fresh and clear, the lingering darkness of the Shadow Seer's curse finally lifted. She took a deep breath, savoring the freedom she had fought so hard to win. Below, the villagers gathered at the castle gates, their faces a mix of awe and apprehension. News of Aveline's victory over the Shadow Seer had spread quickly, and they had come to see if the stories were true, if the one they had once called a monster had truly become their savior. Alara appeared beside Aveline, her eyes bright with excitement. "They're waiting for you," she said softly. "They want to thank you." Aveline's heart fluttered with nervousness. She had never imagined a day when the villagers would look at her with anything other than fear and hatred. I don't know if I'm ready, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Alara smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. You've already proven yourself, Aveline. You don't need to hide anymore. They see who you truly are now. Taking a deep breath, Aveline nodded. Together, they descended the winding staircase and stepped out into the courtyard. As she approached the gates, the crowd fell silent, their eyes fixed on her with a mix of reverence and curiosity. Aveline hesitated for a moment, then spoke, her voice carrying over the gathered villagers. The curse that haunted our land has been broken, she said, her words steady despite her racing heart. The Shadow Seer's darkness is gone. But I could not have done this alone. It was your courage, your support, and your willingness to believe in change that made this victory possible. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a lone voice shouted, 3 cheers for Lady Aveline. The crowd erupted into cheers, their voices ringing through the air like a triumphant chorus. Aveline's eyes filled with tears as she realized that, for the first time in her life, she was no longer alone. The villagers had accepted her, not as a cursed outcast, but as their protector. After the villagers began to disperse, Aveline turned to find her mother waiting for her by the fountain in the courtyard. The older woman's eyes were filled with pride, but there was also a lingering sadness that Aveline couldn't quite place. You did it, her mother said, her voice soft and filled with emotion. You saved us all. Aveline nodded, the weight of everything that had happened finally settling on her shoulders. But at what cost? She asked, her voice breaking. I can still feel the darkness inside me, Mother. Even with the curse broken, it's still a part of who I am. Her mother's expression softened as she reached out to cup Aveline's cheek. The darkness may always be with you, she said gently. But so is the light. You've proven that you can wield both without losing yourself. That is a power few possess. Aveline leaned into her mother's touch, the warmth of her words easing the burden she carried. I only wish Father could have seen this, she whispered. He gave his life trying to protect me. Her mother's eyes glistened with tears. Your father loved you more than anything, she said softly. And he would be proud of the woman you've become. Aveline nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. The pain of losing her father was still fresh, but she knew that he had found peace. The spirits he had wronged had been set free, and now, so had she. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Alara approached with a look of determination in her eyes. Aveline, there's something you should see, she said urgently. Aveline's brow furrowed in confusion, but she followed Alara through the castle and out to the edge of the forest. There, hidden beneath the shade of an ancient oak, was a small, stone marker she had never seen before. What is this? Aveline asked, her voice filled with curiosity. Alara knelt beside the marker, brushing away the leaves and dirt to reveal a series of engraved runes. I found it while the villagers were gathering, she said. It's a memorial, a reminder of those who were sacrificed to the Shadow Seer. Aveline's heart tightened as she read the names etched into the stone, each one a life lost to the darkness that had plagued her family for centuries. These are the souls I freed, she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. Alara nodded. Yes, but there's something else. She pointed to the bottom of the stone, where a new inscription had appeared, one that had not been there before. To Aveline, who embraced both light and darkness to set us free. May the balance you have found guide you always. Aveline's breath caught in her throat as the reality of her journey came full circle. The spirits she had saved had left this message for her, a final gift of gratitude and a reminder that she had done what no one else could. She had ended the curse, not by destroying the darkness, but by accepting it as part of herself. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. I will carry your memory with me always. As they made their way back to the castle, Aveline felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The curse was gone, the Shadow Seer defeated, but more than that, she had found something she hadn't thought possible, acceptance. Both from the villagers who had once feared her and from within herself. Standing in the castle courtyard, she turned to Alara and her mother, who stood by her side. "There's much to rebuild," she said, her eyes shining with determination. "The village needs our help. And I need to find my place in this new world." Alara grinned, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Her mother nodded, pride and love shining in her eyes. "This is your dawn, Aveline. The beginning of a new chapter. Whatever darkness lies ahead, I know you will find the light to overcome it." Aveline looked out over the village, now bathed in the warm light of a new day. The shadows of the past had been cast away, but she knew there would always be challenges ahead. Yet for the first time, she was ready to face them, not as a cursed outcast, but as a protector, a leader, and someone who had found the strength to accept all parts of herself. She smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face, and for the first time, she truly believed it. A new dawn had come, and she was free.